Of course I think we can win, and I'm fighting every single day to win.
We've now put forward a plan that... Is that bird worrying you?
Yeah. They're afraid of us. They can see that our movement is growing.
Well, you're not going to have a stand in the parliament.
Let there be 1,000 lessons learned as far as I'm concerned.
This is the 4ZZZ Break the Election podcast for the Queensland state election in 2024.
Hello and welcome to the 4ZZZ Breaks the Election podcast, just 3 days away from the 2024 Queensland state election. My name's Alexis, I'm the news coordinator here at 4ZZZ, and joining me today are...
I'm Mack.
I'm Jasmin. I'm Tasmiya.
From the 4ZZZ newsroom. How are we all today?
Ready to break the election.
Sounds good. In this podcast series, we'll be bringing you up to date with the election and breaking down what's being said and why. Jasmin, take us away today. What have we got?
The Queensland state election heats up with new poll results showing a change in fortune for the Miles government, especially in metro areas. Polling conducted by the Brisbane Times shows that Stephen Miles is ahead of David Crisafulli in metro areas, with Labor's primary vote rising by 10 percentage points to sit at 32%, while LNP fell by 4 points to 40%, their lowest all year. While the LNP's stance on youth justice has initially garnered them more popularity, their relative silence on reproductive rights has caused their popularity to dwindle in metro areas.
Certainly an interesting proposition. This is the closest these polls have been since Stephen Miles has taken over.
Yeah.
And much more encouraging in the cities than it is in the regions. We should probably start there. Is there a specific reason for that?
The separation between...
For the separations between region and metro.
I suppose it's sort of perceived as sort of like a bleeding art lefty sort of type thing. It's less popular in and around the regional areas who are more typically conservative.
Yeah, so I would say those social issues are starting to hit home in metro areas especially. Some of the larger regional cities as well might have seen a little bit of a tick, but things are going much worse for Crisafulli in southeast Queensland than you would expect based on the larger polls, but he's still expected to win. Resolve was the group that did this poll, and at the moment they're estimating, along with Channel 9, the commissioner of the poll, that the LNP will end up with a 2-seat majority in the next parliament.
Which would be an interesting change of pace, something that I'm not quite sure if they're eager on.
Well, 2 seats is enough. Realistically, they're not asking for a lot from there, but it does make it a little bit dicey on the result, because that's the average result. If all of those things swing uniformly, that's what happens. There could be some variations that we just can't predict.
And we discussed a few weeks ago as well about the variance in some results. If it's too early, or if it's in certain areas, or if it's from certain people or not enough people. It's telling how quickly this has changed, especially.
Tasmiya.
The Brisbane City Council has turned off electricity access to Musgrave Park and Kurilpa Point Park after calling the areas no-go zones, with people having to sleep rough in tents on the premises. Cutting power to the parks was allegedly to prevent electric cooktop fires, violence and antisocial behaviour in the camps. Lights will remain active. Lord Mayor Shriner has gone to the media saying that community safety is a top priority for the council, and claimed that dealing with the parks and rough sleepers must be a top priority for the next state government.
Certainly an interesting topic. What do you think about the idea of removing effectively cooking abilities in those parks for the people who are sleeping rough in that area? Is that a good news story for them?
Whole communities live and grow there. They need electricity for their day-to-day lives. They're not just cooking for themselves, they're cooking for each other. And also declaring the areas as no-go zones is just such a condescending way to describe where homeless people stay and live and love. So, I don't know, the entire premise is just so disrespectful. Not only are you cutting off people's only access to electricity, only access to getting any sense of luxury. Electricity isn't a luxury, it should be a human right, and that's why cutting it off is just not okay.
Yeah, I tend to agree, and considering this is a problem that successive state and local governments have not addressed in Brisbane, it does seem a little bit on the what are they to do side of par, and not uncommon for the council especially to be in this area. They are the council that introduced classical music to King George Square in the early morning to disperse homeless people who were sleeping in King George Square. So
they've also introduced very high-ringing it's almost for dogs. In the early morning, I was walking Queen Street out maybe 7 a.m. and there was, I don't know how to call it. It's just high pitched sounds just in alleyways and everything to also disperse homeless people, similar to animals and dogs. Like, it's getting disgusting.
I would definitely characterise that as disgusting. It is actually quite poor public policy response. It doesn't address the problem. It makes people's lives harder. It's designed for people who are in comfortable living to feel more comfortable about walking around the place, and that's maybe ignoring the requirements of a particular community.
And that's in particular what's even worse, because Shrina here is making it an election issue. Or if you who are not comfortable by seeing, people who we've completely forgotten about and not really cared for living in a public park, then vote LNP is what
Totally.
he said in this whole election.
And them saying that community safety is a top priority for the council.
Are they not part of the community?
Are homeless people not part of your community? Like, it's appallable.
Yeah, it's a deplorable situation, I agree. All right, to wrap up, Mack, what have you got?
We've got the debate. So, abortion, public debt and political donations dominated the third debate conducted by News Corp. Labor leader Stephen Miles and LNP leader David Crisafulli answered questions from 100 undecided voters. Mr. Crisafulli was once again fighting off accusations that changes to reproductive rights were an interest of his party in government, while Mr. Miles was forced to defend the position of the government on its debt obligations. Both leaders also took the time to swap accusations about the Olympic Games preparation, but came to the same conclusion on daylight savings, saying that no change was coming. Rare day we see an agreement over such a minor thing, but
yes,
it's certainly interesting from the third and final debate.
It is really funny. Daylight savings is an absolutely nothing issue at this point, and the media seems to want to make a big deal of it every election, and I don't understand why they do this. What is the big controversy here? What drives this?
It's got to be Crisafulli's complete lack of admittance to this reproductive rights issue that have been plaguing him and his party since the cat has mentioned it weeks ago.
Yeah, and it does seem like little things that the cat has mentioned end up on the state table pretty quickly at this moment. I think there is a growing expectation that the Catters may have some influence over the next government, which may or may not be a problem for the voting public. Who knows?
Exactly. Mr. Catter's grand plan from the beginning. Though it does also come to the question is that this was hosted by News Corp as well, so it was only available via pay-to-view too. So
it was available on their website, but their website is paywalled. It wasn't on their Facebook. It was on Sky News, which is also paywalled. So, yeah, limited structure. And also, even though the 100 undecided voters were picked by YouGov, there was quite a notable bias towards people who lived on the Sunshine Coast.
What was that, 5 out of the 7 questions?
Definitely, there were 5 questions on that list that were definitely from people from the Gold Coast. It only ran for about 30 minutes, so...
Oh.
Yeah, it was a pretty short debate.
Yeah, it really sort of brings into question whether or not they really had the opportunity to address some of the significant questions behind their election.
Certainly. And that's all the time we have for 4ZZZ Breaks the Election podcast today. For more updates, you can find us on 4ZZZ on our morning bulletins, Brisbane Line, Tuesdays, Thursdays and Saturdays, and at midday, and make sure to catch the Pineapple Rebellion 9am on Friday. If you want to support the project, subscribe to 4ZZZ at 4ZZZ.org.au/support. Thanks for joining us today, and we'll be back tomorrow. Goodbye!
Bye.